Good afternoon and welcome to our live Facebook event. Today we have Matt Cropper, President of Cropper GIS. Matt is our consultant for the Linganore-Oakdale Urbana Redistricting Study. And in a few minutes, Matt will explain the two new options that staff have developed for the redistricting study. But I also wanted to let everyone know that we will be taking some questions, and at the end of his presentation, we'll answer a few questions. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just type them into the Facebook page.
Thank you, Ms. Passer, and thank you all for watching this event. We have had one public information session so far. We had one last night at Urbana High School, and we have two more scheduled. We have one tonight at Linganore High School at 7 p.m., and then also another one tomorrow night at Oakdale High School at 7 p.m., and those are expected to go from 7 to 8:30 p.m. But what we're doing here in this Facebook Live event is sharing with you the same presentation that we are giving at on site at these high schools. And this is really to enable the public, anybody who doesn't feel like coming out or who is not able to come out, to follow the process and see the same kind of material that we are sharing publicly with the groups at the public information sessions at the high schools. So to start, this is just a review of the timeline and where we are. You can see we have been working all the way since January on this process and working through developing data materials and then working through options, and also we engaged you, the public, back in March to give you some initial concepts and get some feedback from you. We went back, and after we got some feedback and input from you, and went back and looked at the concepts, and from those three concepts we developed two options, and that's what we're presenting to you tonight. And that brings us to where we are in the timeline as of now, which is the public information session number 3 to present the updated options to the public. The same format as we did previously, and soliciting input from the public and giving you the opportunity to tell us what you think, what you like and don't like about the options. And then this, we're going to, after the public information sessions are complete, there will be a survey, which the survey is actually live now, that you can find on the Frederick County LOU redistricting webpage. And so that's online now, and all the materials that we're sharing with you are also available online now, as well as the interactive map. But after this process is complete, we're going to give you some time to fill out the survey, which will go to June 28th. Is the deadline for you to be able to provide input via the survey. And we're going to take that back and study your input and see if there was anything that we had missed or any other concerns that may have come to light that we may need to address. As long as we can stay focused on our objectives and criteria, we will certainly look and adhere to changes if it's something that we can do. But we will be working on that from June to August, and actually looking at the two options and finalizing them and working towards a recommendation with the staff and the superintendent. The school superintendent is expected to make a presentation of her recommendation for a redistricting plan, which is one recommendation, one plan for elementary, middle, and high school, on September the 11th. Once that occurs, then the board is opening the doors for the public to come give them some input about the recommendation in September. And that is expected to occur on September 17th at Urbana High School, also on the 19th at Linganore High School, and the 24th at Oakdale High School. So that enables you to come talk to the board and share your thoughts about the recommendation, anything you like about it or any concerns that you have about the recommendation. There's also going to be a series of board workshops where the board will be working through the recommendation and making sure they're comfortable with what's being recommended. And finally, the board is expected to take action on a redistricting plan in November of this year. So the purpose of this presentation and the meetings that we're having in the high schools in the evening are for you as a public to learn how the redistricting study has been working, to review options A and B for elementary, middle, and high schools in this study area, and to complete an online survey related to the options to help provide input that's useful for us as well as us as consultants as well as the staff. The last round we did this, your input was very helpful, and it did drive some changes to minor adjustments to the map and other things as we were focusing on developing a plan and continuing to work towards our goals. So we're looking forward to getting your input in this process as well. We are here to explore and develop elementary, middle, and high school redistricting options through a community-based process. So reaching out in ways such as this, as well as engaging the public at information sessions, and also giving the public an opportunity to provide input throughout this course of the study so that we can understand what your thoughts are as work is progressing. We are focused on establishing attendance boundaries for 2 new elementary schools that are planned to come online. Fall 2020 is when the Sugarloaf school is anticipated to open. That's the 2020-21 school year. And then in the north, up in the Lake Linganore area, a new East County area elementary school is planned to open in fall of 2021, so the 2021-22 school year. In addition to that, there's an expansion that's planned at Oakdale, which is anticipated to Oakdale Middle School, which is expected to be implemented the same year as East County area elementary, which is fall 2021. So we're looking at accounting for the new growth, the new construction that's occurring, establishing some zones for the 2 new elementary schools. In addition to that, we're looking at just the study area as a whole and seeing if there are any other utilization imbalances that need to be addressed. So trying to see if there's any ways, if there's overcrowding next to underutilization in schools. In addition to populating the new schools, is there a way that we can balance out the utilization in an effective manner to try to give relief to schools that need it? Our focus is on developing options that best meet the FCPS Policy 200.2 redistricting criteria, and those can be found as well on the redistricting study page if you want to study those more and see kind of the rules that we are following as it relates to if we should move a line one way or the other or best adhering to those criteria. There's an online map that's available for you as members of the public, and also I use it as well when I'm here. It's croppermap.com/FCPSMD redistrict, and this is an interactive map where you can look at, zoom in on the map, you can look at current boundaries, you can look at the 2 options, and there's also information on there on future plan development, and a lot of information and details that you can study. I have a screenshot here that shows you a little bit of what the interactive map looks like, and you can turn on and off layers. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of an orientation on this. So this is just a screenshot, but you see over on the left, this is your list of layers. And this is something that you can use on any phone or tablet or device as well. But if you pull it up on a phone, this will not be shown. You'll notice there's a little arrow box right here that you could click on your phone, and it'll expand the list of layers for you to look at. But in here you have things like planning blocks, and these are planning blocks that basically the building blocks for redistricting that we have built for this process. And think of those as pieces of the puzzle that basically moving these areas to try to accomplish our objectives. Trying to focus on keeping communities intact with these planning blocks, and if an area moves, it moves together, or if it stays together. Notice that there are different labels that are identified with different planning block layers. You can look at, for instance, the PBID labels. If you turn that on, it'll just show you the outlines with the actual ID number for the planning block. That helps us understand where that planning block falls. If you send us an email or a comment saying, I live in planning block 100, we know where that is. In addition to that, there are information on number of K through 5th graders that attend Frederick County Public Schools that live in each planning block. And so if you wanted to look at, say, for instance, the K through 5th grade, you could turn that on and see how many K through 5th graders are living. It's a label that shows you how many live in there. Same thing with middle school, and same thing with high school. And then there's also information on future major development that you could turn on to see an overlay of the developments, as well as non-transport zones. And these are areas that a school where students are not eligible for transportation, so they're expected to provide their own transportation or walk to school. And then you'll see down below then, you see the current boundaries in each option. So you could sort of toggle back and forth on these and look at them. One thing to note is that this has just been refreshed and updated as of today. So if you've been on here in the last day or two, you might pull this up and it still may show some of the old concepts, or maybe not even show the options at all. One of the things you can do is you can go into your browsing history and clear your cache, which would help clear out everything, all the saved files that are behind here, and it'll give you a fresh window. Another thing that somebody taught me just a couple weeks ago is that you can open up in Google what they call an incognito window, and if you did that, you could open up this site via an incognito window, and that sort of bypasses the saved cache in the back end of your computer. If you don't feel comfortable doing either of those, give it a couple of days or maybe a day, and it will resolve itself. But this is something that if you wanted to look at it immediately, you could do some things like that. So we have maps that we are presenting to the public, and I have some screenshots of maps to kind of give you a preview of how the maps differ. But when you look at maps in our documents, there's a handout that we're delivering to you that's available online, and it has maps in there. The background colors on the map represent the option, and then on top of that is a bold outline, so you can see the current boundaries. So that's in a letter format that you can look at those maps. One of the things, though, is that the study area is fairly large, so on a letter size page, it's at a large scale, and it's sometimes hard to differentiate changes. So I would encourage you to look at the interactive map, to zoom in and really start to understand how they differ. Zoom into an area, turn on and off the different options, and kind of understand how the option impacts you. And then the planning blocks data is also available, like I had mentioned. We also have tables and statistics that are available to help accompany what the maps are, how the maps are impacting the different schools. And at the public information sessions, these are shown as large plot maps along with the maps of the plots of the tables. And there are statistics that we are relying on and looking at to help understand the impact and try to achieve our goals. Some of the data that's shown that are used to evaluate the concepts include current and forecasted enrollment and utilization. And I should note that we are working with the most recent state-approved school capacity data in our figures, and so the state has recently approved state-rated capacities for the schools for as current capacity data, and that has been reflected and updated in our statistics and what we're looking at. So in addition to current and forecasted enrollment and utilization, you also have information on related to farm data, which is free and reduced meals. So what is the impact on the farm rates of the schools? I'm looking at both what the current rate is and how each option differs from the current. Feeder pattern splits, so that helps give you an understanding on if a school is getting split from elementary to middle school, how many students are going to each different school, and what is the percentage of the total of the school. So you'll see feeder pattern splits on the data from elementary to middle, as well as middle to high school. Again, we like to compare the current, look at what the current zones look like and how the current schools are split, if they are, and then how each option impacts the number of students that are splitting from an elementary to two middle schools, for example. We also have been calculating student impact, so we know how many students are moved in each particular option, and that's represented in some of the tables and statistics that we've provided you. And also students in non-transported areas. So how many students are living in those non-transported areas now, and then how many living in their non-transported areas for each option. And that's really, in this study area, it's really more applicable at the elementary level, primarily in the Centerville, Sugarloaf, Urbana elementary school region of this study area. So I'm going to give you just an overview of elementary option A, and these are some of the things that I have identified as impacts and ways that the schools have been impacted from a big picture. After I go through these, I'll give you some zoomed-in looks of the options, and I'll point to different areas that have changed and how each option differs. Not to say that you may not identify other things that I don't have on this list, but I did go through this, me and my staff, and put a pretty comprehensive list together. So let's talk about option A. So in option A, some of the impacts are that capacity relief is provided for all schools in the area except for Twin Ridge Elementary. So in this particular option, we're working, if you look at just the current students right now, Twin Ridge is, in this option, is at 102% utilized. So it's a little bit on the high side, and what we don't want to we want to solve problems and solve overcrowding or overutilization issues, but we don't want to try to avoid creating new issues and things like that. So this is something that we've identified and we're aware of, that it's on the high side. But one of the things to note with Twin Ridge is that it's also projected, the enrollment in Twin Ridge is projected to go down, and so that 102% is what it is now, but as time continues over the next 10 years, that 102% is forecasted to go down below 100%, which could potentially suggest that it's not, that 102% isn't a bad thing as it sits now. There's a slight change to farm rates for most elementary schools, and most draw closer to the area average. We really haven't, from what I've seen, there isn't much of an impact on the farm rates of the schools. There aren't drastic swings in farm rate percentages from school to school as a result of this redistricting study, and that applies across the board pretty much from elementary, middle, and high school. In this particular option A, all elementary schools feed 100% into a middle school, with the exception of Twin Ridge and Urbana Elementary. Twin Ridge is feeding into Windsor Knolls and New Market Middle School in this option, and then Urbana Elementary is feeding into Windsor Knolls and Urbana Middle School in this particular option. This option impacts the fewest number of K through 5th grade students, but if you look at the impacts as a whole between these two options, options A and B, you're looking at about 1,500 to almost 1,600 students impacted between the two options. The impacts between option A and option B is only a difference of 80 students. And one of the things to note with the impacts, you think 1,600 kids, that's a lot of students that are moved around, but think of it also as 2 new elementary schools are being populated, and we're in putting that into the mix and thinking about that, it's really 2/3 of the students that are impacted are accounted for by students going into the new buildings, and the remaining 1/3 of the students impacted at elementary are due to other adjustments to help address imbalances in utilization. This option has the most number of students living in non-transported areas among both options, which is primarily due to the configuration of zones in the Centerville, Urbana, and Sugarloaf areas. 3 schools still remain at over 100% utilization on in this particular option. I've talked about Twin Ridge. I'm not going to go too much more into that. The Liberty Elementary School boundary does not change, and it does remain over 103%, so that stays as it is right now, a little bit on the high side. And we've also had transportation talk review these options and give us their synopsis as it relates to the impact on busing. How many more buses are they going to need, or how many may they save? And in this particular case, a net increase of 1 school bus is needed, which I think says a lot in terms of efficiency of the plan or this particular option, because moving students and opening 2 new schools and only needing a net increase of 1 school bus, I see as a positive. Option B is the same in terms of school buses. Both elementary options have a net result in a net increase of 1 school bus needed if either one of these were to be implemented. With option B, all schools are below 100% utilization, with the exception of Liberty Elementary. No change to Liberty Elementary in this particular option. A slight change to farm rates for most elementary schools. Most draw closer to the area average, like I had said. This impacts the greatest number of K through 5 students, which again is only a difference of 80, like I had mentioned. And this particular option, 2 schools are split to two middle schools. East County Elementary School, which is the new school, and Urbana Elementary is split. And then the fewest number of students are living in non-transported areas in option B when compared to option A. So again, that's due to the configuration of the Centerville, Urbana, and Sugarloaf area in terms of students that are within or without, in or out of those non-transported areas. So I'm going to get into a little interactive preview of the options and show you how they differ and how they're alike. And so here you see option A is on the left and option B is on the right for elementary school. If you look at option A, the East County Area Elementary School is shown as green, and there is a blue outline that traces around which shows you the current boundaries. So this East County Area Elementary School in this particular option is primarily pulling entirely from the East County Area Elementary School. From Deer Crossing Elementary School, I apologize. So the East County Area Elementary School is really just is the northern part of the current Deer Crossing Elementary Zone to give Deer Crossing the relief that it needs. In addition to this, as an area that has been impacted, so the Spring Ridge PUD, the Spring Ridge community over here currently goes to Oakdale Elementary, and it is currently split between Oakdale and Spring Ridge Elementary schools. In option A, this area goes into Spring Ridge Elementary, so the entire Spring Ridge development feeds entirely into Spring Ridge Elementary School. That exists as well for option B, so in both options, Spring Ridge feeds entirely intact to Spring Ridge Elementary. Option B for the East County Elementary has, it picks up the northern part of Deer Crossing Elementary Zone, as well as some area from Liberty here off of Gas House Pike. There's some houses, some small section of population here that is off of Gas House Pike that currently is zoned to Liberty that will go to East County Area Elementary School in this particular option. And so that is a change for Liberty. On the prior slide, I mentioned that there was no change, but there actually is a small, slight change to Liberty in this, but it doesn't bring it below 100%. In addition to this being a difference between B and A, there's also an area east of the East County Elementary that's in New Market Elementary attendance area, and this is feeding into the East County Area Elementary. It's the West Wind development, and so that is feeding into East County Area Elementary to give New Market Elementary some relief, which is a difference between option A and B. You see here it stays in New Market, and over here it moves to the East County Area Elementary School. So that is really the extent of the changes in the Lake Linganore area between options A and B. So let's go into another part of the county. So the eastern part of the county, along the eastern edge of the county, shows options A and B here. And you can see in this particular option, Twin Ridge is shown as the light color, which Twin Ridge picks up the eastern section of New Market Elementary School zone. So this rural part of New Market in this option feeds into Twin Ridge to give New Market Elementary some relief. Over on the right in option B, that area stays in New Market because we gave New Market relief by pulling the West Wind community out of New Market to give them some relief there. So that wasn't something that was needed because New Market got relief. Also, option A currently extends south of I-70 a little bit, right in this area. But they do pick up an area of Green Valley Elementary School, the northeastern corner of Green Valley, and this feeds into Twin Ridge Elementary to give them some Green Valley a little more capacity relief. And so Twin Ridge doesn't send any students anywhere, but they do pick up students from New Market and Green Valley Elementary in option A. If you look at option B, the Twin Ridge doesn't pick up from New Market, like I said. This northern area stays intact like it is, but they pick up a larger area of Green Valley Elementary here to give Green Valley a little more relief. And then Kemptown Elementary is shown here in the orange, and I have Kemptown shown in a couple of slides here. It's also represented in the next slide. But if you look at the northern part of the Kemptown zone in option B, this feeds into Twin Ridge. to give Kemptown some balance as well in terms of utilization. So those are the adjustments that had been made on the eastern part of the county as it relates to elementary options A and B. Now I have another zoom that shows you this Urbana, Sugarloaf, Centerville area, as well as the eastern side of Kemptown. And this is also Green Valley Elementary School comes down all the way to Urbana Pike and down to the county line. And this area is all currently Green Valley territory. So I'll start over here first. So this area that is currently Green Valley is moved to Urbana in option A. And also the southern part of the Kemptown attendance boundary in this region right here, it's bordered by this blue line that shows you the current borderline between Green Valley and Kemptown. This area is moved to Urbana Elementary in option A. Looking at the Centerville, Sugarloaf, Urbana area, you can see the Sugarloaf zone is shown as this dark brown color, and it pulls an area, most of this western side of Centerville is feeding into Sugarloaf in this option A. And also, but Sugarloaf also picks up some of Urbana that sits in this region, in this part right here. The Centerville area also sends some students in the rural part, on the eastern part of the Centerville zone, into Urbana Elementary to balance utilization among the three schools here. And so Centerville is shown in this option as pink, Urbana is the blue, and then Sugarloaf is this darker color. And that's for option A. And looking at option B, I can toggle them back and forth just a little bit so you can kind of see how they differ. So that's option A. And if you look at option B, it's a little bit different in that, start again on the eastern side. The Kemptown, the southern area of Kemptown Elementary remains intact. So this area does not move to Urbana in elementary option B. It stays in Kemptown. The southern edge of Green Valley still moves to Urbana. That extends down to Urbana Pike. And this area right here would go from Green Valley to Urbana Elementary. Same thing with the eastern part of the Centerville zone, the current Centerville zone. This feeds into Urbana, and it actually stretches around the Centerville zone so that Urbana Elementary, the areas north of Centerville, feed into Urbana Elementary as well, where they're currently at Centerville. And in looking at Centerville and Sugarloaf, a little bit different a configuration in this area. And the other option, this northwestern part of Centerville, fed into Sugarloaf. And in this particular option, this area stays in Centerville, and then we extend this line a little bit closer right here to Centerville to feed it into Sugarloaf to balance utilization. And I think this is where you see the difference between the students in non-transport areas. This is an area where students can walk to Centerville, or they're in the non-transported area to Centerville. But in this particular concept or option, they are going to Sugarloaf Elementary School. And the same area right here that currently goes to Urbana feeds into Sugarloaf like option A. So I'll toggle back one more time between the two because these are on separate slides so you can kind of see how option A and option B differ. There's also the area on the other side of the street there on Centerville that is feeding into Urbana in this particular option B as well. So let's talk about middle schools. Middle school option A, it's shown on the large scale map to the right. The option A for middle schools has minimal changes in utilization. Only 55 students are impacted as a result of a middle school option A. The only area that was moved in middle school option A is the northern part of the Windsor Knolls attendance boundary that stretches north of I-70, is fed into Newmarket Middle School instead of Windsor Knolls, and that was primarily the adjustment that was made. That's the adjustment that was made. It's just right in this orange area here, and you can see the current zone is shown as green outlines. So this is Windsor Knolls, and this is moved to New Market. Everything else remains intact for the middle schools in option A. Urbana Middle School Zone maintains the same line, and then Oakdale Middle School maintains the same line. There is no other change between Governor TJ, Oakdale Middle School, Urbana. The only two schools that are impacted here are the adjustment from Windsor Knolls to New Market Middle. So students in the north part of Windsor Knolls are assigned to New Market Middle, which also is closer. And you'll see that also I have listed a net decrease of 2 school buses as a result of option A, and that the district will save 2 buses. And that's primarily due to the population there north of 70 that's currently going to Windsor Knolls. With that going to New Market, it actually results in a net savings of 2 buses for the middle schools. So that certainly is a positive. There really aren't any impacts in terms of non-transported areas and students within them in any of the middle school or high school options because of the location of the schools and communities around it. There's not many walkable communities immediately adjacent to these high schools. Urbana Middle School does not change, so it does not get capacity relief. So Urbana is close to 100%, not quite at it yet, but in this particular option, it does not have any reduction of population, so it stays at the same utilization. And then Windsor Knolls Middle School is split between Linganore and Urbana High School, and then that feeder pattern becomes a little bit less balanced. Currently, Windsor Knolls splits roughly 50-50 between Linganore High School and Urbana High School. In this particular option, it goes from 50-50 to about 70-30, which isn't necessarily, that's not too low, too small of a split. We try to keep when we look at feeder pattern splits, we try to look at things, try to have them higher than 10% if possible, and try to just keep a good critical mass of students carrying on to the next school if we have to split a school. So that's middle school option A. Middle school option B has some changes, some differences here. That has still minimal changes in utilization among the schools. This option impacts twice as many students as middle school option A. 110 students are impacted in this. Looking at the map, the eastern side of Windsor Knolls, this area that goes up north, stays in Windsor Knolls. But Windsor Knolls helps provide some relief to Urbana on the south side, along the south and eastern part of the Urbana Middle School zone, and this feeds into Windsor Knolls. This is something that it does extend almost across the entire eastern part of the county in this particular option for Windsor Knolls. Oakdale Middle School in this option is at 64% utilization, but the school district has done projections, enrollment projections off of both these options, and Oakdale Middle School is projected to go up to 98% in the next 10 years if it were to be 64% through the design of option B. So what I'm saying there is that this could be a proactive look for Oakdale to prevent it from getting overcrowded as development continues to occur in the study area. And then Windsor Knolls covers a large distance north to south, is something that I had observed in looking through option B. So let's take a look at option A and B from more of a close-up angle here. So this is north of I-70, and New Market Middle School sits right here. Windsor Knolls is down south of the screen here, and you see the green outline over here. It shows you the current Windsor Knolls Middle School boundary. It comes all the way up here, and in this particular option, like I said, this region of the county is feeding into New Market Middle School out of Windsor Knolls. Looking at option B, that area that I was just talking about stays in Windsor Knolls, but the East County Area Elementary School, a portion of the East County Area Elementary School feeds into New Market Middle School. So this is something that differs from option A, and that we are sending a section of East County Area Elementary into New Market Middle School. Looking at option A, south of I-70, you can see that basically no change in this area, south of I-70 at the middle schools. Urbana stays intact, Windsor Knolls stays intact in this area, and you could see by the common line, the current boundary line is the same as the background color, so it doesn't show any kind of spillover or change. When you look at option B, this is where the Windsor Knolls boundary does stretch further south, and that a section of Urbana here is feeding into Windsor Knolls, and this also aligns with some of the feeder pattern alignment of what we've done for elementary schools in option B as well. And then this area of Urbana Middle School is feeding into Windsor Knolls. Some of these rural streets and roads and communities here that are feed up into Windsor Knolls Middle School as opposed to Urbana Middle School. You know, we did a distance calculation when we were looking at this to see the difference in distance between Urbana and Windsor Knolls, and it's not. It may appear to be a sizable difference, but actually when you start to calculate it and look at it and study it, there's not a substantial impact on transportation as a result of that area going to Windsor Knolls versus Urbana Middle School. So with options for the high schools, option A is shown on the screen here, and with the high schools, we are sending in option A some areas that are currently Urbana High School up into Linganore High School. And this exists, the communities that this is occurring in is primarily the Lansdale development, which is currently actively building, is currently split between Linganore High School and Urbana High School. In this option A, all of the Lansdale development feeds into Linganore, so the community carries on to the same school together. And then the northern section of the Kemptown Elementary School zone currently feeds into Urbana High School. This area feeds into Linganore High School now. Oakdale High School is not impacted in this option. Some of the impacts, the large big picture impacts, are that capacity relief is provided to Urbana High School in the short term, so we move students out of Urbana High School to give them relief. But the enrollment projections do show that capacity challenges are going to remain an issue at Urbana, and enrollment is going to continue to grow in here, and eventually Urbana High School is going to be back to over 100%, as well as the other two high schools in this study area. No changes in non-transported students. Like I mentioned, there aren't many students living around these areas that can walk to school or that are not eligible for transportation, so there is no impact in the high school non-transported areas. Relief is provided in the short term, but again, long-term growth continues to show continued pressure on high school capacity in this whole study area. This option does impact the largest number of 9th through 12th graders among the two options. Option B differs in that the area that's in Kemptown that was moved to Linganore in option A, this region right here, that stays in Urbana High School. Lansdale still feeds into Linganore in both options, this Lansdale development here. And then the section of East County Area Elementary School that was moved to Newmarket Middle School, it also feeds into Linganore High School for feeder pattern progression, also thinking about transportation efficiency between the two schools, and balancing utilization as well among the schools. This option has a better balance of utilization among the study area high schools in terms of projected enrollment when you look out in the 10 years, the out years of the projection. And then other than East County Area Elementary School and Lansdale Development feeding Linganore, those are the only two areas that are impacted per high school option B. So I have the same kind of slides that I was showing you previously, showing the areas that are impacted. So you have, again, like I had discussed, the Lansdale development right here. Currently, the northern part is fed into Linganore. This feeds the entire Lansdale development into Linganore High School to give Urbana High School the relief it needs, as well as pulling sort of the area around Kemptown Elementary School, which is shown right here as a school point, feeding into Linganore as well. to give Urbana some relief. Looking at high school option B, again, the same thing with Lansdale is feeding into Linganore, like I had discussed. In this area that was moved in option A does not move in option B, which is shown right here on the map. And then the East County Area Elementary section right here that was moved to New Market, this feeds into Linganore High School for the reasons that I had stated when I was going over some of the impacts. So there is an online survey that we have available for the public, which is live now, and you can go on to the Linganore Oakdale Urbana Redistricting page to pull that off and fill out that survey. We encourage you to tell your neighbors and friends that they can participate remotely if they can't make it to these meetings tonight or tomorrow night, and watch this presentation, which will be recorded, and you can watch it later, as well as filling out the survey. The survey deadline is June 28th, 2019. Other ways that members of the public can participate and that the district is communicating with them is obviously the redistricting study page that I've talked about. That's a repository for information, so we share lots of materials with you, things that we are looking at and studying that we're sharing with you, as well as things that we're sharing at the public information sessions. Find Out First is a method to communicate to parents and letting them know what's happening with the process, so the district is actively using that to reach out and inform the public. You can always email the district at louredistrict@fcps.org if you have specific questions or anything that you'd like to share. In addition to providing input via the survey, you can always send an email there, and the district staff is monitoring that email continually, and they're also sharing those comments with myself. And then social media outlets, Facebook and Twitter is a very good method that's being used by Frederick County Public Schools to reach out and inform the community about things that are upcoming and other events that are occurring for this process. So at the public engagement sessions, we're doing 15 to 20 minutes of questions and comments and questions, and then we open it up for a gallery walk where you can go look at the maps and talk with staff and consultants around the maps. So I think at this point, we'll open it up if there's any questions from the Facebook Live community.
We have a few questions. Some of them center around accessing the map itself, so can you go back to that screenshot? And while you're doing that, I'll just again explain how to get to this page. The project web page is www.fcps.org/ nope, that's the wrong one, /LOU Redistrict. When you get to that, that's the first page of the project web page. You'll go about halfway down and you'll see a heading that says Interactive Map. Click there to access the interactive map, and you'll get to this screen right here. So one of the questions they asked was, if you zoom in closer on this page, will they be able to see the street names?
Yes, that's a good question. So at this scale, we don't show too many street names. If we were to label all the roads at this scale, it would just look like label soup, what I often refer to it as. But as you zoom in on this page, you start to see more detail on the map. Actual property lines start to show up, so you can see parcels. Street labels start to populate and show. And so a lot more detail starts to show up as you zoom in on the map to see sort of more zoomed in area and how the streets are oriented in various areas. So yes, they do show.
And they also asked about getting access to PDFs of these maps. We can post those for you as well if you want to take a look at those. But you can zoom in on these to see the streets, and these should be able to get you all the information that you need. Is there a graph to show how many students actually get shifted per each middle school option? So I think there are two ways that you can get this information that you're looking for. If you want to know the total number of middle school students that are moving, there is a document that will be posted on the website, and we can talk about where you can find that in a second. that has, it is the statistics for these two options. And there are tables in there that show the total number of elementary school students moving, the total number of middle school students proposed in each option that are moving, and the total high school students proposed that are moving. If you want to know about a particular area that is proposed to move and how many students are in that particular area, you can turn on the planning blocks layer, and you can also turn on the students that you want to find out about. So if you want to know how many middle school students are moving from a particular area, you zoom in on that area, you turn on the middle school planning blocks, and the number of students, sixth through eighth grade. So I'm going to let Matt repeat that and point out where those places are on the webpage.
Yes, and so yes, you can look at that to see the number of 6th through 8th graders that live in each planning block, and if you turn on the option that you're interested in, you could see how that differs from place to place. That's one way to look at it. As Ms. Passerb said, there's also impact data in our statistics handout, and that shows you the total number of students that are impacted in each option. And also below that shows you a detailed table, and the colors on the table that are in tan color shows you students that are moved. And so it says the current school, the option school, and how many students it is. And that can tell you how many students are moving, where students are moving to school, and how many students that accounts for. And so that the detailed impact tables would be a good source, or as Beth said, looking at the zooming in on the options in the interactive map and turning on the planning block labels to kind of see how the planning blocks are shifted and how many students are there.
There's a question that the capacity data is coming from the state, but where are the expected enrollment numbers coming from? So the capacity, the state revised how they want all public school systems in the state of Maryland to calculate their state-rated capacities for all schools. And they ask all schools across the state to revise their calculations and submit them to the state for review and approval. We did that, and we have now gotten approval from the state for those new state-rated capacity numbers. Those numbers, that approval came after the March information was released, and so that's why you'll see a different state-rated capacity in these June options that we've shown. The enrollment projections are done by FCPS staff, and the data comes some from the state. We get birth information from the state, and we can extrapolate that to the number of kindergartners we would assume to be having in 5 to 6 years from that birth information. We also have historic information for every school for every grade level, so we know the grade succession rates. All that information is put into calculating the enrollment projections. We start with the number of live-in students that would be in each of these new attendance areas. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that you covered it pretty well. You know, the expected number of students are from future developments is a calculation that the school district develops through their study of developments and student yields and things, and then they do their projections. That comes from the school district, and the school district submits the capacity figures to the state, which gets approved by the state. So those are the only things that's the only component here that has state approval, which is the state-rated capacity numbers.
And along with that, they've asked, will you be providing the enrollment projections for the next 10 years in a table for each school?
We have in the statistics handout, there are enrollment projections per option for each school, and it shows you the projections for 2020, 2021, because those are the 2 years where the new schools are forecasted to come online. And then we show them out in the 5 years from there, and then at the 10-year window, so you could see how the projected enrollment looks based on our estimates as we sit right now, and then looking at a couple subsequent time frames, time points out to the 10 years.
Is there a new high school proposed in the near future? There is not a new high school for this area of the county proposed in the near future. We don't have a site for another high school yet in this area of the county. At one time, we did have, I thought you were moving that. No, that's okay. We did, Monrovia Town Center had, when they were going through their development approval process, they did include a future high school site. That development has been stalled in the courts, and at this time, we don't know when or if that will move forward again. So at this time, we don't have a high school site in this area, and we don't have a new high school in the near future. Staff is paying attention to this. We continue to monitor the 3 high schools and the enrollments. We continue to work with the county to look for a future high school site. So we are looking into that. I want to get to one last question now, and then anyone who didn't get their questions answered, we will get those answers posted up onto the Facebook page, and any additional questions you might pose, we'll get those answers up. The question is, are the September meetings to share thoughts on the given options, or are we able to suggest new changes to the given options? So what we've tried to do during this redistricting process is to have you walk through with us as we move through this process. So we, in March, we presented concepts. We had 3 concepts that we had looked at initially. And as we began to look at the data, we asked the communities and the public and the families to look at those concepts and give us your feedback. As we began to look at more data and consider those comments that we got at that time, we then developed 2 options. So those 2 options are presented at this time, and as Matt said, we'll be taking comments through the end of June. Then staff will be working with Mr. Cropper and the superintendent over the summer to craft a superintendent's recommendation, and that is what will be presented in June. That will be presented to the Board of Education, that will be presented to the Board of Education in September. That will be presented at the board's September 11th meeting, and then the Board of Education will hold their public hearings in September. Matt gave you the dates. I believe they're 17th, 19th, and 24th. September 17th at Urbana High School, September 19th at Linganore High School, and September 24th at Oakdale High School. Those are public hearings for the board for you to give your comments to the board about the superintendent's recommendation. Then the board will consider all those comments at their second September meeting, and they are scheduled to make a decision in October then. So that's how we'll be moving forward. We hope that you take time to provide your feedback on these options, either through the survey or through sending us an email at louredistrict@fcps.org. And if you have any other questions, just leave them on the Facebook page or send us a tweet. Thank you.